claim, how can Jesus be God if he is the Son of God? Wait a minute. Jesus is divine, right? Isn't that what you all say? But wait a minute. He says he's the Son of God. So which is it? Is he the Son of God, where God had babies, or is he God himself?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? Where God had babies. That's the insistence, and that's actually the only position the Quran allows. In Surah 6, verse 101, it says that Allah can't have a son because he doesn't have a wife. And to that, we would say, we agree. God's not a biological being that produced biological offspring, but that's not what we're talking about when we use the term Son of God. When we use the term Son of God, it could mean a number of different things. I'll give you 6. The first and the most significant is just referencing us as God's creation, that we are all his quote-unquote offspring. In Acts chapter 17 and verse 28, quoting, believe it or not, the Greek poet Diogenes, and acknowledging something that was true. We are all sons of God in the sense that he created us. That's also supported in the book of Isaiah chapter 64. In the sense of heavenly creatures being creations of God, not just human beings. They are also referred to as sons of God in Job chapter 1 and verse 6. In Exodus chapter 4 and verse 22, the nation of Israel is specified not just as God's children, but God's firstborn. And that's significant because it's noting not just a status as children, but a status of honor. Now, that wouldn't be describing chronology, since the nation of Israel wasn't the first nation to ever exist, and nor would it say that God physically birthed the entire nation of Israel. In a sense, it's speaking of what? A relationship, not a biological one, but a familial one nonetheless. In 2 Samuel 7:14, David's family history is noted as God's children, that he's going to set them aside for not just unique privileges, but unique discipline, and including a very significant prophecy of the Messiah, that when Jesus would come, it would be through the line of David, that one who will come from his seed will sit on the throne of David forever. That's noting that the one who's going to reign isn't going to be from his lineage, meaning that he's going to have an infinite posterity. It's going to say what? Someone is going to come out of your line who will rule forever. He'll exist forever and rule during that time. We know who this is talking about, but note once again, David wasn't the son of God in a biological sense. He was the biological son of Jesse, who was a Hebrew, not a deity. Likewise, in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 9, Jesus describes the behavior of people who will be qualified as sons of God, where he says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of the living God." That isn't speaking of biological origin. That's saying if you have stuff in common with God, you reflect his characteristics like Jesus did, which was the whole point of the Sermon on the Mount, then you will be considered a child of God. Why? Because you're representing him like Jesus did. And then lastly, in the sense that Jesus was the Son of God. Jesus, and there are many passages we can cite just for the sake of time, John chapter 5 and verse 21, the one who shares God's power, authority, and nature, someone who has the right to raise and judge the living and the dead, which according to the Quran, by the way, is also something only Allah can do. But Jesus claims, I'm the Son, and just as the Son does what the Father does, the Son does also. There's an equal status of power and nature as the true and living God that the Father and Son both have. Now, is that again describing a biological relationship? No. John 4 says, previous chapter, God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. So in every single example the Bible ever gives or uses for the term Son of God, the one the Quran attacks and says that's impossible has never been the one the Bible ever talks about. God has never produced a biological offspring. So if you co-opt the term Son of God and say it can only refer to God having a wife and producing a biological offspring, I grant that if we're talking to a pagan, but we're not. We're talking to both people who believe that God is spirit by nature and that you can have titles that, of course, denote more than one meaning. Catch them on that insistence and say, that is not what we mean. And when they challenge you, be prepared to look it up. Say, well, can I get back to you on that? I'll give you more than one example than just the few I could maybe gather together here off the back of my hand. If they won't give you that dignity, which they haven't, I'm speaking from experience, you know it wasn't a sincere question. You're talking to a genuine Muslim who unfortunately has been taken under their wing by people like Muhammad Hijab and Zakir Naik and all these other people who are parroting Ahmadiyyat's bad arguments. Islam doesn't survive this because it shows the author of the Quran didn't know what Christians meant by Son of God, or Jews for that matter. The point being made is this: the Bible has never meant Son of God, meant God had a wife and a biological son. It means a relationship, and that could mean a wide variety of things. In the sense that Jesus is the Son of God, it's referring to him sharing his unique attributes, for example, judging and raising the living and the dead. So that's how we would deal with that.
Good job.